Thank you very much for coming today. I wanted to introduce myself. My name is Mike Fornander. I am the CEO and owner of a company called Neurallink. Neuralink's a audiovisual UC kind of video conferencing integrator. Today we're going to talk a little bit, and I will be the first to tell you, I am no expert. I think all of us are probably in here for that same reason. We're not an expert in this, and I would love for this to be as collaborative as we can make it, because I'm going to ask you specifically some questions on things that have worked, maybe Gen 1 of an active learning classroom, what are some of the pitfalls, all those kind of pieces. But just for me to get an idea, how many university, whether it be technology, curriculum, design, do we have in the room? University represented. Okay. How many manufacturers, maybe other manufacturers, because I know there's a few. What other areas am I missing? End users, students? Integrator. Okay, yeah. Okay, so like ourselves, that's true. Integrator. Well, I was saving that one for best for last, right? So really quickly, Neuralink is based out of Boise, Idaho. I'm a Boise native, born and raised here in the Northwest. And actually, funny enough, in the room are some people that I went way back, and we were a company called Data Projections out of Houston, Texas for a number of years. And then over the years, obviously, just migrated and bought out the Northwest kind of division or operations from Data Projections. So we have about 20 years in the Valley, over there in Boise. Pretty much touch on into the western parts of Montana and Wyoming as well. And then obviously you can see that dot over there in the Puget Sound area as well. In 2017, we made an acquisition of a company called Blue Sky Integrated Technologies. Laura and Greg, really true friends of ours. We know each other through the PSNI. It's a global affiliation of like integrators around the country. Got to know the Blue Sky family over probably the last decade, and kind of came to merge our two companies together. Greg is retired for some. I see a little nod maybe. Laura's still working with us as well, so in the Seattle office. So that's kind of who we are. Super proud. Last year we were actually named in the top 50 in the North Americas for integrator. For us, that's a big thing because Neuralink was a tiny little thing of my imagination about 20 years ago. So super proud of our team. We're about 58 employees across the two offices here in the Northwest. Hi there. Today I just want to touch on 3 topics and really kind of dive into those as a group. Benchmarking our existing spaces, these active learning spaces, improving version 2, so taking those, and making some tweaks, making some, hey, this is what we discovered, and adapting those. And then maybe just giving you a little bit of a take on my perception as an integrator, working with 150 some odd manufacturers and what we see coming out from them. Just some discussion around what could be some of those next gen solutions to really continue to, I guess I would always call it, build a better mousetrap. Come on in. That's all right. Really quickly, how many are engaged currently in active classrooms across their campus? Okay. How many have been doing that for 3 or more years? So a few as well. So I'm going to be leaning on you guys to help me out then, because you're going to be the experts, right? You've got it all figured out, right?
Oh, yeah.
Well, let's dive into benchmarking. Are we asking the right question when we're benchmarking these rooms? A little bit of my background, just so that if I talk like I know what I'm talking about, I was a teacher. I was an elementary school teacher for 10 years before me getting into the audiovisual industry. So I know that's not higher ed, but for me, there's still that understanding of teaching modalities, teaching and learning styles, and this whole, I think, drive to I guess improve education to the point of making active learners and making better employees for the workforce coming. So we did a survey amongst actually all the attendees coming to this, and I just wanted to share some of those results initially. One of the questions was, how would you rate your overall outcome of your space versus your expectation? So, you know, we had about 50% of the people raise their hand and say, how are you? Say that you are 2-3 years into an active learning environment. And so the question came up, you know, what would you rate that overall outcome? Significantly exceeds, slightly exceeds their expectations, which is funny. These should probably be switched. I giggled with Kylie on our marketing side. And then slightly below expectations. So as you can see, about 65% exceeded expectations. So pretty decent first go, right? There's still obviously a small amount in there in that slightly below our expectations. And that's what I want to kind of dive into, is what we heard from some of those results. What didn't work? What was that red part? What was that 35% of slightly maybe didn't exceed our expectations? And this is where I might want to maybe solicit a little information from you guys. Those of you that have done some active learning, what were some of your pitfalls? What were some of the failures? And failures is a strong word, isn't it? Sorry. What were some of the challenges? Okay. So the overall adoption of what does that truly mean, active learning? Kind of like he was talking about this morning, we could build a classroom that has all the abilities to make this a more active and vibrant learning experience, but if they're going to go in and teach the exact same way in the environment, it's not going to work, right? Or it's not going to achieve the intent, okay?
Exactly kind of what you were saying. It's not about the technology. It's about what you are doing. And usually the more they brought in the technology, if it wasn't really simple and they weren't really prepared, it got in the way of active learning and getting people to express dialogue and synthesize.
Yeah, did everyone hear that? So it was a lot about, it's not about the widget or the gadget. It's certainly about the intentful choice of the technology so that they have a use, they have a need, but they're not there just for, hey, this is the latest and greatest, right? As well as, obviously, then, how do we make these individuals comfortable, even with what might be the simplest technology to some of us instructional designers or whatnot? How do we get that across to a professor that might be very tech-phobic or those things? Any others? You know, things that just didn't quite work? Perfect example. So to recap, space. You know, obviously new construction, that's an easy one. We can dive in with an architect and some designers and whatnot and build out a space that is going to suit this need perfectly. But in many cases it's no, you're going to recapture that space. And if that's a tiered auditorium, or if that, I mean, those are challenges right off the bat, right? So space, that's certainly another great, you know, what parts haven't worked so far. Anything else? You know, we heard slow adoption. That's probably to your point of, you know, the instructors or the professors not really embracing. You know, it's tough. They're given a curriculum, and some would say they have ability to mold and to change that curriculum based on their coursework and their syllabus and whatnot. But they are given a curriculum or have taught that curriculum for you know, years and years prior to that. So to change that, I mean, back to my elementary experience, it's they go to the file cabinet and pick out the unit that, you know, came from that next month, versus this takes all different preparation. It takes, again, additional creativity and probably that general, he was talking a little bit about it this morning, that ability to just kind of put yourself out there as this may fail, you know, but as students, am I okay failing in front of my students and that? So whoops, the others all came already. Lack of scaled standardization. That probably comes also to, you know, accessibility to this new room type. If there's one active learning classroom on campus, how quickly are the instructors going to move to that type of instruction if they have access to one room and there's the challenge to that? Now, I don't know if that's the case. Those of you that have done it for 3 or 4 years, did you deploy quite a number at one time? So yes, you did. What was that number roughly? 39. So certainly abundance and accessibility for that one. Yours, not so many? Okay. Did you see them used as much as you wanted? Okay. And how about you on your side, having more accessibility?
Yeah, 90%.
Okay, so 90% utilization. Okay. So that overall standardization, can we do this in a bit of a more one fell swoop versus one or two rooms at a time? Okay. Faculty awareness, we've talked a little bit about that, understanding that active learning environment, just understanding it, buying into it. Why are we doing this differently? I've done this 20 years, you know. I was going to retire in 5 years. You're wanting me to relearn this. We all know those pitfalls. And then overall understanding, I'm going to stand over here. Overall understanding of how to leverage or adapt current curriculum. So again, that kind of, I've been doing this for a while. Overall, how did you rate technology in this active learning space? So this was based on the solutions that were in there. We talked, you know, to your point of, you know, if they're in there just to kind of be in there because they're the latest gadget or widget, whatever you want to talk about. In this case, 40% said they were either too advanced or too simple, and really too simple was a small amount. So probably closer to 35% said, you know, the technology was probably a little too advanced. And I'll be the first to stand up here. Integrators in the room, you'll agree with me, I bet, and that is that we've spent decades over-engineering audio-video spaces. Actually, all the end users nod too, so they're like, yeah, you guys have. But it's true. I think there is an absolute drive towards simplicity, you know, and getting away from saying, oh, but look what all this can do. The too advanced, you know, what was too simple or too advanced? A lot of people say that the routing, kind of the video routing of how to maybe go from one pod's display up to the main classroom's display or to everyone's display. It was, in one case, it was too simple. All they could do is, you know, all small groups or pick which small group goes to all. Well, the other person said, well, it was too complex because it was more of a matrix, and boy, at that point, you're now having to drag and drop all of these variables to it. So we know that routing and video routing, specifically video I'm thinking, but that goes with the audio for the source or control or those, has to be just more fluid and more instructionally aware, right? And just in time, so that can be done the minute instructors walking around an environment and seeing, hey, this pod's got something. They're on to something. I want to just kind of throw that to everyone really quick and just make a point of it. It's not run back to the podium, hit a touch panel, you know, go to your matrix page, reroute, whatever. There are several solutions out here. We were just talking about one on the Wolf Vision side of their Synap and the ability to have a Synap at each location and do this micro kind of small group, and then at any one point say, okay, I want to send it, and it could be to just a few other pods if it's going to that. And I always forget the phrase, I wrote it down, that think, pair, share. Kind of that idea of as you're kind of slowly growing from an individual to a small group to maybe two of the small groups grouped together, real easy abilities to, you know, share these deals. So video routing is certainly a complex piece. Video conferencing comes up all the time. Those of you that have had active learning spaces, video capable? Video conferencing capable? Yes? Yeah? Yeah? Were there complications in that? Did you have? Okay.
Like we built in the video, but then we didn't consider, oh, we probably need a mic array or something.
And is the audio not necessarily for source audio in the room or instructor teaching audio, but all student audio? Okay. As well as far side audio? Someone coming in remotely? Okay. Yep. Yeah, and I think that's the key. What he said is that's where your prototype room comes in. You kind of have to build a test bed. You have to, and we'll get into kind of this design philosophy, because you have to get the feedback and the buy-in from your faculty, your TAs, your instructional designers, your campus facility, IT is probably even the most important, and we'll talk a little bit about those. But video conferencing configurations have always been a struggle, and that's pretty common sense in that you're now trying to have 7, 8 video conferencings all in one room. So you've got bleed over of audio, you've got pickup of rogue microphone stuff that, so it's all about how do we select those devices now. And there are, probably from 3 or 4 years ago, there are plenty of new devices that do start to, and we'll talk a little bit to those, start to make that easier. Allow you to, tie down that zone of mic pickup so that it might just be in that pod of 4 on that kind of active learning console. I hate to say it, but the whole cone of silence and some of the speaker zoning, I hate that thing. It looks like a salad bowl on a string, but there's reason to say we have to design to something of that sort. We have to contain audio in this small group until it needs to go to the whole group, right? So, and then recording. Heard a lot of people say recording was too simple, but also recording was too complex. So it's kind of that, again, that happy medium. Again, remember the simple side was only about 5% of that. So most of what we're hearing is the complexity, and that was, what are we recording? Are we recording only the content on the student or on the teacher's main display or the main classroom display? Are we recording literally versions of everything going on? Are we recording active presenters? Are we recording their microphone as well? Are we recording a far-end video call? I mean, those are to that point of piloting this and really sorting out what that use case is. So with that, knock this off? Oh. With some of the pitfalls that we've had, what do we do to improve that version 2? To be honest, the lifespan of technology these days, 3 to 5 years. We're seeing and I know from a procurement standpoint that sounds horrible, but we're just seeing the generations of technology start to supersede themselves in a cadence of about 3 to 5 years. So if it was 3 or 4 years ago, at some point you're starting to look at, taking one of those labs maybe and starting to look at prototyping newer things, solving maybe some of these issues that you've had. In my mind, you're going to, and again, this is my opinion, but you are going to have a much harder time if you don't at least solicit the information from, and I added last night, there's 4 groups I think are very critical. And obviously, what's that? 5 rooms? Is that?
5 groups.
Oh, 5 groups. Am I missing?
Facilities and communication.
Yeah, okay. So maybe I'll encompass all that in my 4th group just as a get me by. But I threw in there, anyone have an idea of what I put in 4th group? He has facilities and what was the other? And the communication side. That might lump in a little bit to IT, not really, but depending on the campus. That wasn't, neither of those were my 4th group. Anyone guess what my 4th group was? Students. It's always a hard one though, because you're opening up a major can of worms in regards to, but if it's going to be effective, if it's going to work, they've got to have some buy-in.
How do you get people to brainstorm about doing things they've never done before or never seen before? Because it's easy to parrot ideas that they've used, but if you're bringing in students in particular and they've never been exposed to active learning, how do you go about getting their input?
I mean, I'm always a believer of example, lead by example type of deal. So, and again, you might not have it on your campus, so you don't have something to show them, but whether that be a virtual tour, find some of these, as we're here these next couple days, find some of those districts or universities that are doing this actively and seeing if there's an opportunity. One, I don't know if this allows, but could you take a micro group of that to those campuses to dive in there if they'll allow that? But the other one would be virtual tours. A lot of times they are at least amicable to videoing some of the interaction or some of those experiences, bringing that back with a video kind of virtual, I guess you'd call it, field trip for that group. Because you're right, they don't know what they don't know, right? That's what I don't know though, is if there's an abundance of resources out there for that type of what does this truly look like. It would certainly be something that I think this this affiliation or association could work on, is kind of sharing some of those success stories, because you're right. I mean, they need to see, one, the effect of it, what the students are saying about it, what the professors are even saying about it, so that there's that buy-in as well, that, look, this isn't just a pie in the sky, you know, a flash in the pan, it's going to go away. This is kind of where universities are going. I don't know if that answers your question, but that would be my initial take on it. So professors, you know, just pretty simply, obviously we're looking at what are they, you know, what are their roles in this? They're listening and viewing, because again, we know active learning, they're not supposed to be a pinnacle guy in the front instructing, right? They're facilitating, they're proctoring, they're initiating that thought, but then they're allowing this active learning to happen in those pods. They are contributing though, so there's elements of design that have to be based on their involvement. What we're seeing in that is sometimes that's tough if it's just a laptop wirelessly presenting to a, you know, one of the pod displays, because it's typically the reach over your shoulder or whatever. There's that inner, what am I trying to say? That space, I guess, kind of piece. We're seeing a lot of people start to talk about Gen 2 rooms as having interactive displays, so that could be more of a walk right up to the display and add to or contribute to that learning. Well, there's a barrier there though, right? Furniture design, if you've got an active learning furniture that's right up against those monitors, so we got to start thinking about those pieces as well. And then recording, again, archiving this piece. How important is that? I was asking someone a couple days ago on how critical is that anymore, because I've seen many attempts come and go of, well, you know, all we were able to archive is the content, the instructor and or students' audio that are presenting. Are you guys actively recording pretty heavily? Okay. Posted and accessible then to students for, you know, after class type usage? Same. Are you guys doing recording? Is everyone that's doing active learning doing recording, or is there anyone that is not recording their active learning environments? So primarily everyone. So that in itself is obviously one that we've got to identify with those professors what is important, what is the archived capability of the room need to be, and what's that student value afterwards. You know, what are they going to get from that? The instructional designers, who sits in that kind of category in this room? Okay, so we got a few of us in here that are kind of those people that your concerns are obviously that engagement. How do you create these spaces that are truly engaging, and each individual, you know, again, the smaller those small groups, the better, because the more active they have to be in that small group environment. I've heard the number 4, but I've also heard the number 6. You know, 4 to 6 is about as big as you want those small groups. Simple to use. And this is because they're a steward of the professors. They're the ones that are going to hear from the professors when it's, I don't even know how to use the room. It's too complicated. So, and then efficient. And I should have probably put a little timer on here, make sure I'm doing good on time. Doing good on time. I want to leave some time for question and dialogue too. IT team, obviously, have got to be at the table. And I'm just going to spread these out. Can it live on our network? Can we do wireless presentation? How many students can do wireless presentation? Is it, are we streaming the video for video routing across the network versus maybe traditional matrix type switchers? Are we encoding audio? How are we pulling audio from those students? The other one is untethered teaching. Really kind of goes with that same idea of that wireless, right? Our teacher has to be mobile. Has to be untethered. It's not a front-driven classroom. And that comes twofold. That's not just with their content that they're presenting or adding, but that's also to the control of the environment. I believe a solid active learning environment has to be accessible control-wise from the instructor and or potentially many others that are in that active learning environment. Why not give the students the ability to say, okay, the teacher says, hey, yeah, show that to the class. Does the teacher really have to be the person that pushes the buttons? Or could a student switch over to that interface as well and make that change? So untethered and control is a big part of that. And then again, the whole infrastructure requirements. you know, from security, wireless presentation, and video conferencing. Sounds like a lot of us have hit that Gen 1 of these rooms. You know, that has been a piece that has been addressed. Bandwidth, though, I mean, it's not going down. So IT has to have a buy-in on what the infrastructure can support, because now you're not just doing a instructor is wirelessly presenting to this solution, but you're doing up to 12 to 36 students are doing wireless presentation across this network, across that access point. So do we have to get more redundant in these rooms? Do they have to have dedicated access points? Likely yes. Do they have to have, you know, some of those accommodations for sure? And then again, that fourth group, you know, and I agree, I think there's probably a fourth, fifth, and sixth, so I'll just lump them all in my fourth group choice. But students should be at the table in that. Facilities probably as well, that was a great one. And then that whole communication side. Communication could probably have tons of different reasons as well, from the overall university branding and messaging of what we're bringing now as an alternative to you know, these potential students' education. So tying them into that and the importance of offering that type of a active learning environment as well. So just a real quick, I'm going to spend about maybe 5-10 minutes on just future roadmap stuff that I see out there that should be some considerations. And then I just kind of want to leave it open. But before I go into that, are there any initial questions or comments or?
There's a lot of desire in those students. They know what they want.
Yeah.
They've been in it now for 6 to 8 years, 10 years. It's not new to them.
Yeah. Just, I don't know if that catch box is on or not, but is it? Okay. The point was very much that, gosh, kids coming out of K-12 are already engrossed in this. I mean, whether it be interactivity, whether it be, you know, 1-to-1 ratio of bring your own device type labs and capabilities. So they're already kind of being cultivated for that type of learning, and then to hit, you know, a bit more of a historic kind of model tends to potentially, I don't know that I've got any statistics on it, but I would probably go to guess that there's probably fewer that start first year and are saying, hey, I don't know if this is for me. I'm going to go out into an IT or a tech type industry where maybe that degree that I was hoping to get isn't as important because I can't learn in that environment. So, good point. So what are you saying? This is, again, based off that kind of survey and some of those things, is standardization is key. I think all of those rooms have to be, and identical is a tough word, but they have to be pretty dang close to similar. I need to walk into any room and be able to function, you know, operate it. I'm a professor and I've got this class, but I'm also teaching over in these other 3 rooms. The experience has got to be the same. And if it's not, you're going to experience those issues of coaching them through, well, this is the reason why that's this way, or this widget's different than that widget. A lot of people are saying they are upgrading that to an interactive type environment, and some of that is based off just that overall collaboration kind of feel, and that getting up and annotating and doing some of those kind of things and capturing those annotations. With that, however, that still needs to be shareable to, you know, the other group. So, you know, as you're looking at interactives, some of them have like an overlay type Android-based deal where you can annotate over top of things. But if that's not shareable via the PC content to the other groups and pods and whatnot, then it's a pretty enclosed kind of solution. So again, that needs to be somehow ingested into the PC content that you're working with. The better video conferencing, and I've got some ideas there. Virtual labs was one that came up. That one was interesting. And Z-Space is an augmented and virtual reality type display. You can put on goggles and you've got, whether it be human anatomy or mechanics or soldering simulators in those. So I'm assuming they're thinking of those things or some Oculus type, virtual lab type environment, software driven probably. Soft codecs, I think, are going to play a big one. I can't imagine that you guys have done it via hardware codecs, all soft codecs.
Hardware codecs.
You did hardware, okay. So what was your choice to go hardware over software or soft?
Part of a statewide network that has a hardware-based platform. And
Okay.
it's part of the rules
Okay.
of
Okay.
being on the system to use hardware.
Yeah. To allow you to use the infrastructure to kind of do some of that piece, it had to be a standard-based.
And have things like automatic scheduling and automatic dialing happen.
Okay.
So that's
So a perfect example of understanding your state resources that you might have, any of your overall college kind of resources that you have in those areas. Hardware was absolutely probably the way to go in this case. We're seeing a lot or hearing a lot of people say they're going to leverage soft codecs a little more, and I can understand that that's also if you've got 8 pods in a room, 8 hardware, Cisco codecs or Polycom codecs or all those would probably become a fairly expensive room. So a soft codec residing on a PC might be a little more flexible ability there. And it's PC based, so again it's already something that you might be routing around that room from a content standpoint to share.
That's something that we see changing pretty quick.
Do you? And I would imagine the manufacturer that they're requiring you to have as a hardware codec has a software codec side. Okay, yeah, so Spark, right? Jump you onto Spark or something like that. Yep. Yeah, there's just a lot of flexibility in that software codec. BYOD, certainly have to adapt to that. I mean, that's kind of a standard now. And then again, switching and routing, there's some complexities there. On the switching and routing, like I was talking about, people are looking for a single solution, not okay, we have wireless presentation, and then that wireless presentation goes to an input that I can then route that input to any output, and this little Swiss Army knife of can we find a product that will allow me to wirelessly present to my pod and to my display, but then with a push of a button also send that to all the others, or multicast, so to speak. And I'll tell you, I know that there are 2 or 3 solutions out there. Raise your hand if you've got one in this room. 1, 2, 3. Okay. Well, you're users of ones, right?
I actually integrate our own stuff.
Oh, okay.
We built our own, we're not using one at all.
Ah, okay. Very nice. So if you can build your own or want to talk about building your own, this is the man to see. But yeah, there are several manufacturers out here that have some really slick kind of newer products that now integrate that wireless into routing. And so it's not an overall, get the wireless, get the matrix switcher, get the, those days I think have kind of come and gone. There's a place for all of it, but in this particular, to try to maybe keep these rooms costs a little lower, there are some of those solutions. And scalable, I think again, part of that is can we find this solution that's a little more affordable that does both wireless presentation and routing so we can multiply these rooms, right? We can get into more rooms if we can get the room cost down. And we're seeing all the same. This is kind of just me agreeing that yes, not as much, I don't know if this has a laser pointer or not. I don't know if this replaces whiteboards. Man, I'm still does anyone take to-do notes on a tab or a pad of paper? As much as I could do it on OneNote and as much as I could do it on tasks and planner, and I still love writing and I don't want that art to die, but I still think there's probably space for whiteboards even in these environments. So I don't know that it replaces whiteboards. I think it's more that the displays we're potentially using might become touch. There's a reason for that annotation and that interactivity in some cases. Some may say, no, we've tried. Anyone tried touch and decided, we're going to pull it out? No, not yet. Anyone done touch in theirs? You have touch in all the 30, whatever, 9 or cool.
You consider smartboard a touch?
Well, I mean, it's a touch. Yeah, it's projection and touch.
Yeah, we had them and we couldn't get instructors to use them.
Okay. There may be a reason of just reliability, possibly, but then also user adoption to that point as well. Okay. And that would be the reason what we're seeing in the industry is most are moving away from that interactive projection to flat panel interactivity, because you don't have shadowing, the bulb replacement, the off orientation, alignment, all those kind of things. So, but no, I mean, that's touch, and that would work. But you were probably hitting other hurdles more than inherently. This touch needs to just be intuitive. It just needs to be walk up to the stuff you're doing and, oh, I'm going to doodle some notes across this as well, or make a point, or those. So, well, let's look really quickly. Interactive displays. You know, I'm not going to go through all this because you guys are in the technology side as well. But there's a ton of things you need to consider. You're not going to see a whole lot of surface capacitive. That's our phones. You know, I think our phones are in that piece, and in all honesty, it's a very expensive technology to make. Surface Hub, for example, was that type of technology, and we know at least a reasonable size for a classroom, an 84-inch Surface Hub at the time was, what, $21,000? So I don't think surface capacitive, in fact, we've seen some of our manufacturers that make those start to go back to more of a, where are we at? Projective capacitive, just because it's a little less expensive, and what they've found is the accuracy is almost to a T there as well versus that of the surface capacitive. Resistive, that used to be your smart boards. Sorry, is your smart boards. Sorry, not used to, but that was that. You could feel it, right? You were pushing that front surface and touching. You won't see that in any of the displays. You won't see much of the SAW. You'll see IR and projective capacitance in our interactive displays. And I would say projective capacitive is a little bit of a combination of multiple technologies. It does take a tiny bit of, or some manufacturers are blending those two together. They're kind of saying, well, let's use IR and projective capacitive to even improve that. Again, don't want to go into much more on the technology itself, but sizes have certainly changed over the last 2 or 3 years. So you can now get up all the way up to a 98-inch interactive display. The types of touch we just talked about. And then the other piece to consider is some of the hardware and software of that touch device. What are the inputs and outputs? And I say that very specifically because if you can output from your screen to that routing whatever solution, then again, anything annotation-wise you're doing over top of your content is also going with your classroom share. PC card slots, you know, that might just be to not have a NUC or a HP Blade or something tucked somewhere. It could be a PC-based slot. Some would say, nope, I don't want anything to do with PC-based slots because I have our standard, and if it goes down, I can replace it in a heartbeat. I'm kind of that adage, but the interactive display manufacturers love their PC slots, so threw them a bone. But then signage, alerting, and sharing. Some of these interactives are actually coming with the sharing built into it, that wireless sharing. Don't know if it's robust enough for the multicast and the assist, you know, kind of this active learning environment, but in its isolation does work. But then they're also tying in some signage and alerting so that you could, if this room isn't being used or one or a couple of the pods aren't being used, you could have some signage reel playing on that without having a player. You know, they've got it built in now to some of those displays. So just a little bit on interactives. Some of the video conferencing part, I love some of these where they are showing an active video conference going here, but for some reason they're kind of forgetting about the cameras or the microphones. So we all know we have to deal with those as well, right? Soft client means we can look to USB-based peripherals. And the other thing with active learning, for sure we know, I don't know if everyone knows you could even holler out anyone know who makes that camera? Looks like that is a Panacast 3, yep. 175 degree camera. The Hudley is also another kind of 180 degree camera. The Meetup by Logitech is certainly, I think that one's actually closer, about 120. But you have to have a wide angle lens. I mean, if we're pushing students in these small pods right up against the displays, our standard webcams aren't going to cut it anymore, right? We've got to give the people on the far end the same experience as the people in the room. If we're going to do video in any education, but if we're going to do also video in active learning, the experience has to be mutual for the far end user. And that's a tough one to go by, because a lot of times 5 minutes, thank you. A lot of times we forget that that experience needs to be as equivalent to the people in the room. This is a manufacturer you probably all know, but just wanted to point it out. There's now cloud-based video conferencing platforms that provide breakout rooms. And pretty simple to just hit a button and the 6 pods jump out into breakout rooms and are breaking out with potentially remote students in each of those groups. And then with a push of a button, you can consolidate everyone back into the same. Again, the issue you're going to have there, and I know people have probably had those challenges, is you've got 6 to 7 active video conferences in a room. Probably okay when you're on the different calls or in those different breakout rooms. The minute you go to join everyone back together, you got to be very strategic in that, because otherwise you're making 6 calls to the same conference from the same room, and we all know what that'll do. You know, from the, I don't know if I can, you know, the feedback and the echo and all those other pieces that come with when you're testing a room and you dial in with your phone or your iPad and the thing goes nuts. So we've got to manage that piece. I hate it, but is there some sort of cone of silence type piece? Some are achieving that more in a bit of a microphone with its embedded speaker there, so it's contained kind of right there at you, as opposed to ceiling based. Selection is there. This other one's a new one. Anyone heard of crowd mics? Just recently purchased by Biamp. They're here as well, so they'd be able to talk to it. Got a great way to leverage. Everyone has a phone, so really now everyone has a mic. And that's all that is it's a app you put on your iPhones. It allows you as a student to submit a, hey, I want to talk. There's a proctor or a moderator that can approve or disapprove that, and that then there is a breakout box essentially that comes off of the network into a more traditional line level or analog level microphone to feed your classroom mixer or amplifier. Crowd mics is a cool one. They also have embedded in that some polling and that stuff. Some of you probably already have polling type softwares and some of that way to engage these learners a little more, but that is kind of a tied in solution with that crowd mic. These are some of those I was talking about earlier on, you know, the all-in-one. Can we wirelessly transmit my presentation as a small group, but then link that single device at my pod to all the other pods, and kind of consolidate this wireless presentation routing kind of piece to it. And then I'll just kind of blow through this just real quickly because I want to give you some time for questions. Bring your own device. We all know we have to accommodate for this. And I still have HDMI in there. I'm a firm believer that wired is always better than wireless. It's not always as ideal or convenient or whatever, but I guarantee I can present anything HDMI versus wireless. And then networking, man, from the IT standpoint, if you haven't already had major conversations with the IT side, video's going on the network, audio's now going on the network, and control is going on the network. Unfortunately, the IT team just got a lot more power, right? And or we have to play a lot nicer with the IT team. And I say that, we're all in IT. My company's half IT now because our world is IT. But it's something that we have to begin thinking about. And again, maybe that's the Gen 2 side, or, you know, was yours network-based at all? Was yours streaming? So yours was SVSI or NVX, okay, Crestron's, yep. Extron's got encoder, decoder solutions now. I mean, there's plenty of options when it comes to encoding and decoding video. Not all of them are the right option. So here comes the hook. So I'm going to leave it at this. I don't want to take everyone's time for questions if you don't care about questions. But if you do, I'm happy to stick around and answer a few questions through my card and a pamphlet or something here if you have any further asks. But any questions from the group or comments?